in the intro to his series, he cites the Capitol insurrection, he cites Charlottesville, and then he cites the Oklahoma City bombing, and he says there's really no equivalent to that on the left. And I'm sitting here going, we have a Charlottesville happening every week in this country, in cities like New York, with hordes of people marching down the street with Hezbollah flags and Palestinian flags.
Hello, my name is Anne McElhaney,
And I'm Phelim and welcome to the Anne Phelim Scoop.
all the
What's
all
on the
the way
show
from
today,
Ireland.
Anne McLeod? Yeah,
Well, all
sorry?
the way from Ireland, I think. First of all, Phelim, we're all the way
Yes,
from Ireland. We're not in the same room, but we're in the same sort of location. So yes,
jurisdictions. What's on the show today? We are going to pay tribute to our dear friend, the man, the legend, Detective Jim Wood, who put America's biggest serial killer away for life. The man who discovered Kermit Gosnell, Dr. Kermit Gosnell, the Philadelphia abortion doctor. The man who really, without him, Gosnell would still be doing what he does. We're going to talk about him. He's retired
mhm.
uh, again, and we're going to pay
We
tribute
think
to him.
this time he's
And
really retired. Yes,
yes, well, you never know. We should talk to his wife about that one. So we're in Ireland, Anne, and we're going to discuss what a weird, weird place it is.
yes,
Um, and this time it's personal. I grew up on one of the most dangerous roads on the planet, not far from here, and safety improvements have just been stopped for the third time. We're going to discuss it. Climate change,
of
of
course,
course.
yes.
And talking of climate change, Anne.
Yes. Meanwhile, yeah, exactly. A family who were celebrating a birthday were wiped out along with all their guests because whilst the climate alarmists and while the climate experts at the
Expert.
National Weather Service can predict the weather in 100 years and 30 years and 40 years, they seem to have a real problem with predicting what's going to happen this afternoon and
On
on
Lake
Lake
Tahoe.
Tahoe. Exactly.
Yeah, in California, it's a lake. And anyway, so we'll talk about about experts, believing experts, and who's
Yes.
the real villain here in a country, in a jurisdiction not far from here, where a mother is imprisoned for years over a tweet she deleted. We're going to be looking at how a singer is still walking around
Yeah.
after calling for death to the IDF. We bring you the truth about two-tier justice in the UK and the horrible, horrible Glastonbury Festival. And we have a special guest, Stephen Miller, who's going to tell us about how the media, from Biden to Iran, are more interested in covering up the news than actually covering the news.
Yes, and has the Supreme Court bankrupted Planned Parenthood? The Supreme Court has been very busy this last few days, and it's making incredible history, telling the courts to stand aside and let the president make history. We bring you the details on all these gorgeous victories. And
And
by
we're
the
going,
way,
yes,
please leave comments. By the way, where when you on the show, we read all of your comments, and some of your comments will get read out. By the way, and for those of you who are following the drama of my AirPods, which were lost on the Mark Stein cruise when we were at Celebrity Cruises, and we've been watching my AirPods. They've been in Norway. They've been in all kinds of places, but they've spent quite a bit of time recently in Banja Luka. And today they moved. They're in Croatia now in a place called Ingrain. Okay, Phelim.
oh,
So we
okay.
will keep people. Oh no, we're going to keep people
Even I'm
informed.
fascinated by this one. Yes, yes. So yes, Jim Wood is retired, Anne. We should explain who Jim Wood is. So
Hello,
Jim Wood is basically
hello.
The Gosnell case, Kermit Gosnell, America's biggest serial killer, the abortion doctor, Philadelphia, who murdered babies, murdered hundreds, perhaps thousands of babies in a 30-year killing spree. He's now serving multiple life sentences in a Pennsylvania prison. Gosnell they were initially investigating him because he was selling opioids. It was a drug investigation until Jim would heard about Karna Maya Mongor, uh, an immigrant who died under his care, let's say. And Jim got very interested and he checked for a police. I remember that he checked for a
Yeah,
police number,
yeah.
a police report number, nothing. He thought that was very odd, very suspicious. It was strange. He became Karna Maya Monger's champion. He realized that Gosnell was basically running an abortion mill. He was a serial killer.
I
He was
really
killing
love
babies.
I
Go
really
ahead.
love what Christine Wexler had to say, the Assistant District Attorney Christine Wexler at the time, and we have the quote in the book, and we wrote a book called Gosnell, The Untold Story of America's Biggest Serial Killer. And one of the quotes in the book is from ADA Christine Wexler, who said, Detective Jim Wood was Carnamaya Monger's champion. He was the only one. And if it
Hmm.
wasn't for Jim Wood, no one would have known about this woman who was so badly treated and had such a horrible death caused by the neglect and the crazy, awful conditions at the Gosnell Clinic, where he had nurses, who none of whom were qualified, where he had an anaesthetist who was 16. She was in high school. And it's amazing more people weren't killed. But
Yes.
Jim Wood we really just want to do a massive shout out to Jim this week because he just retired. We weren't able to be at the party. He is one of those people who just give you faith in humanity. What a beautiful, wonderful human being. He deserves so much praise because at the time when this case came to him, he was working at the district attorney's office, but he was on a drug task force. He was like chasing down bad drug guys. And of course, Kermit Gosnell came to his attention because Gosnell was also selling prescription drugs. But then he heard, exactly as you said, Phelim, he heard about this woman, Karnamaya Monger, a Bhutanese
Hmm.
refugee who had spent 20 years in a refugee camp in
Yeah.
Nepal, only to get to America and be dead 4 months later. And he just became, as ADA Christine Wexler said, he became the champion for this woman who the progressives of Pennsylvania, would love to, clap themselves on the back and say we're all about, the refugees. Not really, actually, not so much.
No.
Actually, nobody cared about this woman until Jim Wood turned up, and he just never stopped. And we made a movie, we wrote a book, and in the movie, Dean Cain plays Detective Jim Wood brilliantly. And actually, I think it's a good idea, Phelim, for us to show a clip now. And actually, this clip you're going to see here is Dean Cain playing, and it's like the film is very much based very, very closely on exactly what happened. And so
Yeah.
Gosnell's clinic was raided by Jim Wood and a whole bunch of other agencies, by the way, but after Jim Wood brought to the
Hmm.
attention that this was crazy stuff going on there. And this clip will show you the Jim Wood being played by Dean Cain telling the ADA, basically telling the actress who's playing Christine Wexler what he saw when he went on the raid of Gosnell's clinic in West Philadelphia.
You are not going to believe what I saw last night. The stench was unbelievable. He had all these bags everywhere. He said they were medical waste. We opened up some of them. There were little bodies inside.
Bodies? What do you mean? Fetuses?
Oh, I mean, they looked like babies to me.
How many?
So far, we found over 30 of them. Stuffed inside jugs, inside bags, in the refrigerator, the freezer, everywhere. Oh, the jars. This guy put babies' feet in jars.
What? What do you mean in
No,
jars?
like, look, right here. Look at that. I mean, is that normal? He had dozens of them. And then they let him go work on this woman while we were there. And I'm telling you, this woman was bigger than Joan was when she had Charlie. And that's got to be illegal, right?
I don't know.
A woman that big? I mean, there has to be some kind of a limit on when you can have an abortion.
Yeah, but I don't know what that is.
I thought you were a lawyer.
Woody, I have 5 kids. What do I know about abortion?
So yeah,
Yes.
I mean,
Baby
and we
feet.
would
Yes.
highly recommend the film. Go on, film.
Yes, Gosnell had baby feet from jars. That's what because he's a serial killer, and that's what he does. So yeah, Jim is retiring. He retired from the Philadelphia District Attorney's office, and after he convicted Gosnell, then he went and worked for Montgomery
Yeah.
Police Department there. Again, I think in drugs, did a lot of undercover work. I mean, there's so much. You should buy the book, actually, the Gosnell book, Gosnell, The Untold Story of America's Biggest Serial Killer. I mean, the thing that always struck me about Karnamaya Mongar, we did actual research on this. She was an actual, genuine refugee in a world of fake refugees, all these people
Yes.
claiming fake political asylum. She spent 20 years in a displaced persons camp in Bhutan. No, not in Bhutan, in
In
Nepal.
Nepal.
Because she was ethnic Nepalese. And the king of Bhutan who is so loved and by all the progressives in the world because he decided that Bhutan should not have GDP as a measure of greatness, but I think it was general happiness as a measurement. But he didn't. That happiness did not include ethnic Nepalese people, so he expelled them all. She spent 20 years in a tin hut on the side of a mountain in Nepal before she was granted refugee status. By the way, if there wasn't so many fake refugees, she'd have been granted refugee status a lot quicker. But
Hmm.
anyway, she was an actual refugee. She came to America. I think within 6 months she was dead. In the
4 months.
most
Yeah,
one of the
within
most
4 months she was dead. But
yeah,
people really, I mean, you're saying about the book, people really, we're incredibly proud of the book, which became a New York Times bestseller. It sold out within 3 days of publication. We
yeah,
got invited to the White House because of it. We actually ended up, in fact, not only writing the book, but we obviously created this movie, the Gosnell movie. We also had a play. And we've had a podcast. And it's
yeah.
funny, Phil, it just occurred to me. I was listening to a podcast myself the other day, and I was listening to John Boyne, who is the author of the Boy in the Striped Pajamas. And I've always felt a little, I mean, I didn't say this to you, but always felt a little bit like, we did the Gosnell movie, we did the Gosnell book, we did the Gosnell podcast, we did the play. And then I listened to John Boyne from the Striped Pajamas, and he said,
Mm,
there is an opera, there is a musical, there is a play, there is a movie, there's the book. And I could be forgetting something. There's a ballet. There's a ballet. And in fact, he
right.
said of all of the other forms that they had done, but anyway, he said the ballet was his favorite. So I shouldn't feel too bad because actually the story needs to be told and retold in all kinds of ways. And
It
we
does.
also
It
would
does.
highly recommend the podcast, by the way, where you hear the voice of Jim Wood himself telling.
And and you hear the voice of Kermit Gosnell.
That's
So
right.
the podcast is called Serial Killer, a True Crime Podcast. That's
Yes.
Serial Killer, a True Crime Podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, couldn't recommend it enough. You'll actually hear Gosnell's voice. You'll hear Jim explain how he brought down America's biggest serial killer.
And actually, Phelim,
It's
actually, just to give people a hint, because I think it's worthwhile, let's just play a tiny clip of Kermit Gosnell himself speaking to us from his prison in Huntington, Pennsylvania. Let's listen to a little of that.
Yes, well, that wasn't my fault that they didn't inspect me. I felt that I was on the cutting edge of the technology, and I definitely feel that I was among the most qualified and highest skilled providers.
This is a call from Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution, Huntington. This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
I thought homicide was ridiculous, because I know I didn't commit any homicide. Didn't feel that I had done anything wrong at all.
That was quite
Super,
the experience.
super
Speaking to
creepy.
Kermit Gosnell.
Yes, it was. And we went to the prison, and it was, yeah. Let's
Yes.
talk about that another day. We need to go on. But actually, before we finish, basically, we want to say a massive, massive shout out to Jim. God bless you. And we could not wish you more happiness, more health, more laughter, more of everything good in life because you are a good man. And what we're going to play now is Dean Cain, who played you in the movie, sent you a video message on your retirement. Let's watch that.
Jim Wood, it's Mr. Dean Cain. Look, I know I'm a little bit late, but it doesn't change the fact that you are retiring. God bless you. God bless you for what you've done. My friend, you are a true superhero. Yeah, I said it. I'm in a car going to dinner. I'm a little late, but God bless you, my friend. And good luck in retirement. I'm not going to retire for a long time because I'm so much younger than you.
Okay, so we
I
are.
can I just say, I want to say something. Actually, I think the president should give Jim a medal.
Oh, that's a great
Uh,
idea. Oh, we'll have to think about how to make that happen, Phil. That would be a very nice
yes.
idea. Okay,
Mm,
so moving on. We are in Ireland, and I think
yes.
it's fair to say Magda. By the way, our colleague Magda lived in Ireland for a while, and that's where we first met her. And we just talked about that the other day, Phil, about how Magda despaired at the weather in Ireland. And
Mm,
something. We're kind of despairing a wee bit ourselves now because
a wee
people
bit.
talk about how much it rains in Ireland. It is quite shocking. As we speak
It's.
right now, it's pouring rain outside. It's been
I'm
pouring
looking
rain
out the window.
all
It's a
day
national
and all night.
tragedy. It's a national tragedy. This
It's
is why
really
we write
terrible.
such sad poetry.
That's right. And why people
But
drink so much.
Ireland, apart from the rain, Ireland is a strange place, and we're here from bottles to puberty. I don't know, from
Yeah, I mean
bottles
the
to
weather, like the weather is one thing, right?
blocking.
But actually, I think I have to say, coming back here, it's incredibly disappointing to realize that Ireland basically gave up religion. The decline in the Catholic faith is extraordinary, and what they've substituted for the faith is just valueless progressivism, and
Mm.
it's everywhere. You see it everywhere, and you wouldn't, and you really see it in the political leaders in Ireland. I mean, they are the most unbelievably disappointing bunch of people. None more so, and I've got just a couple of recent stories that have just occurred since we got here that we just thought, oh my God, including the Irish. So Ireland has an ombudsman for children, so
That's
obviously
great.
cares so much. But this guy, I mean, and
He's the
he's
voice of the
very
voiceless.
he apparently that's what he's meant to be doing. But to describe how fabulously unimpressive he is, it's really hard to put it into words. But a very impressive senator, Sharon Keoghan, who's basically like literally the only voice of sanity in politics in Ireland, as far as I'm concerned. She wanted to ask the ombudsman recently about puberty blockers, about how he's responding to the reports from Tavistock, from the Cass report.
Well, let's explain.
Go
So the Cass report, which is the British analysis of how they treat so-called trans children, basically found that there was no standards, that children were allowed to self-affirm, self-diagnose. It was driven ideologically. That children suffering from mental illness were given irreversible puberty blockers, that they were mutilated and destroyed for ideology, that children couldn't consent, that young children can't consent to life-changing treatment
Yes,
that may be just temporary. So, we all speak the same language. They're only over there.
yeah.
We share a lot of the same health service
And it's
protocols and all
also,
that.
it's even worse, Phelim, because actually what happened was
That's
children
right.
from this country who were suffering from body dysphoria were being sent to England, to the Tavistock. And we're talking about hundreds of Irish children were sent, including
That's right.
apparently a 5-year-old, and either a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old. And this one politician, this Senator Sharon Keoghan, is literally like the only person who's asking questions about this. But she recently, in the last few days, she asked some
Yeah,
questions
but
of this ombudsman. And I think maybe should we watch it, Phelim, or should we just
let's play it.
tell?
Let's play it. It is Niall Muldoon, the children's ombudsman, the man who's there for the voice of the voiceless, standing up for children, taking on the rich and the powerful, the vested interests without fear or favor. Let's take it away there, Niall.
The gender affirming care for minors, the Tavistock and the Cass review, and the Irish referrals to Tavistock. If you can give me your thoughts on each of those, I would really appreciate it, please.
You asked at one stage, was there any complaints in regards to inappropriate referrals? To my best of my knowledge,
I asked, given the number of individuals reporting irreversible negative outcomes post-treatment, has your office undertaken or considered undertaking a review of the impact of these referrals on Irish children, the children that have gone to Tavistock?
Okay, that's something we haven't considered. I would engage with Professor Donald O'Shea on a regular basis around this. So again, as you say, he identified concerns. I would be aware of those concerns, and I would have engaged with him around that. Our point of view is always that children and the government have promised to provide appropriate care for all of our children. Mental health care, physical care, medical care, and the best possible care. What has happened here is that we've let our children down who have, for whatever reason, are asking questions. We've let them down and we haven't provided that service. We outsourced it to Tavistock.
That's right.
Tavistock has been closed. We now are brought back and we've created a new individual or a lead, and we're creating a new team now. But again, throughout that period of time, there's a range of children, I don't know what the numbers are constantly asking themselves questions that we don't have anywhere to bring them, anywhere to talk to them, or multidisciplinary teams to work with them.
As an advocate for children, the UK has permanently banned puberty blockers. Do you believe actively endorsing a pathway for children questioning their gender, that you've actively harmed these vulnerable children and leading them down a path that is irreversible? Do you see the danger that could be to children? Do you think Ireland should ban puberty blockers for children?
I don't believe I've actively caused any harm to children. I think what we've always done is promoted a child's right focus, which is always encouraging the children to go to.
Do you believe that Ireland should permanently ban puberty blockers like the UK did? for children.
I won't be answering that question because that's a medical question to be considered, and that's other people can decide that.
Thank you, Senator Keoghan.
So basically, he has nothing. He has nothing to say. Actually, he has no answers to anything. And
he's got a cozy hole.
Yeah,
he's got a cozy hole. He's happy. He's not going to rock the boat, and he's not going to do the best for children because that would mean he would have a dinner party where he'd be unpopular.
Yeah, and in a world where people have lost all faith and belief in God, by the way, they're finding gods all over the place. Basically, this particularly, and as you say, Phelim, like it's not like there isn't like a really close country, like the closest country that we have the closest relationship with, the UK has, had this breakthrough report from CAS, really, extraordinarily damning, saying, and they have decided in the UK to stop all puberty blockers for children, for any young people. That's how serious this is. But over here, I'm not gonna say much at all. So that's annoyed me. But but other things have annoyed me, by the way. So I was, I'm getting older. We're all getting older, and I have had this thing, and it's been bothering me for a while. I didn't even tell you, Phelim, and I was like, so I'd come to Ireland, and we drink a lot of water. But I know, don't judge us, but we buy bottled water. So I'm opening them, and I'm finding it difficult. I'm thinking, oh God, that's it. The strength is going in my arms now. That's it. Until I really discovered, because I realized it was on my mind last summer, by the way, and I didn't say it to you, Phelim. Then I went back to the States, and I'm like, I can open bottles really easy here. What's going on? So, of course, I looked it up and found out. So Ireland basically has completely lost its sovereignty. So Ireland can't make a decision on anything without talking to the European Union and making sure in the European Union, all the unelected people in the European Union are happy with them, including the fact that they've got these bottles now and that a bottle top, it can't come off. It has a thing. So when you unscrew the bottle, the top stays connected. And because of that way that it's designed, makes it really hard to open bottles. So that kind of, I have to say, really did annoy me. And then I turned on the TV the other day, and one of the morning shows, morning shows, did a morning show here, and they had a comedian, an Irish comedian called Katie Boyle. And you know what she was telling us about? Oh, it's really so funny. She's so funny. She has a comic act about an abortion she had in the United States, as she called it, in Trump's America, as she called it. And long story short, I think what was really horrible and really upset me about it was that she was laughing, and the two hosts couldn't laugh enough, by the way. There's photographs of them laughing themselves, harshly laughing to themselves at her telling the story about this abortion. Yeah. And she says, by the way, and I the first thought I had was, we've come such a long way from Bill Clinton's, safe, legal and rare. Like we are, I don't know, centuries away from that in terms of the thinking. Now it's all a big laugh, very far from safe, legal and rare. It's all just a big laugh. But she said, of course, because she's awfully interesting, Katie Boyle, that the reason that she's doing this comedy act is she wanted to highlight the lack of you'll love this, Phelim. She wanted to highlight the lack of education around reproductive health. The lack of education. And it's actually kind of interesting, by the way. Well, it's actually kind of interesting because obviously I listened to all of this show, so you didn't have to. And she had this kind of like, she didn't know that when she went for the abortion that she'd be out, like they would put her out, and that there'd be a lot of pain, and she'd take medicine and afterwards. And it's kind of an interesting detail, by the way, which is, there is a lack of education. She's actually right, because Planned Parenthood, the last thing that they want to do, the very, very last thing they want to do is to tell you what an abortion is. That's the last thing that they want to do. And so she's actually kind of right, except for she's not right at all, But it was just kind of horrible, and it was very one-sided. And I felt like the two presenters didn't say anything. They didn't say something like, what about all the women who regret abortions? What about the fact that every abortion ends the life of a unique little person, a little tiny person is finished? Like, no, let's not recognize that at all. And by the way, Ireland obviously changed the law in 2019. And since then, and I'm obviously the new numbers for 2025 aren't out. So basically about 60,000 babies have been killed in that time. And the Irish pro-life campaign, I was just looking up what they had to say about this. And they made this, oh my God, I don't know if you heard this story, Phelim. So the Irish pro-life campaign, are obviously very upset about it. They were writing and tweeting about it and all of that. But they said, no one mentioned the story that they have been highlighting, which is a story, again, from Ireland, where a woman had a late-term abortion in Ireland, and she heard her baby cry. before he
Yeah,
died,
yeah,
and she has
yeah.
been unable to return to work ever since due to the
Well,
trauma.
and
So not
there's
that
a
funny, Phelim, you know.
no, there's a lack of education. No, you're so right about the lack of education. You know, if people became educated about abortion, they know that it's someone's job to have a sieve, to sieve
Yes,
and make sure that all the remains come out and put together the remains to make sure that
yes,
all the arms and the legs and all the recognizable human bits have been
yep,
removed.
yes,
You know, why do we? I mean, my story about Katie Boy. I've been watching Katie Boy for quite a time. She's a comedian on Instagram, like where a lot of comedians ply their trade these days. And I've never found her particularly funny, but I just thought that was me. You know, it was all
yeah,
very,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
isn't America funny? You know, it's like it's not that funny. It's funny. It's funny if you make it funny. But a relative of ours,
I know
a young relative of ours,
who we love
saw
dearly.
her. And I didn't know, you know, I never said anything. I went to see that, I went to see a comedian, an Irish comedian, Katie Boyle, and she goes, you know, she wasn't that funny. And like,
Yeah,
I was thinking about it afterwards. How often do you hear that?
yeah,
How
yeah.
often do you hear
I
someone
went to a
say,
comedian and it wasn't very funny, you know.
yeah, I mean, even the bassist beggar comedian is funny, you know.
Yeah,
Normally you can
yeah,
get a
I
laugh,
know.
but I have to say, I see her on Instagram. It's not political. I just think I think her
Yeah,
humor isn't, her
and
observational humor isn't very deep,
yeah, she
and
seemed
neither is
kind
her
of,
knowledge of
yeah,
abortion either.
she was, yeah, anyway, it was a kind of a really horrible segment. And, you know, for morning television, I just thought, my God, and children going to school and people watching that. But anyway, dreadful.
But we're very
And
concerned with Palestine here. We're very
we're
concerned with
very,
Palestine.
very concerned about Palestine. But before we get on to Palestine, another story that I just thought was really, you know, and again, this is random stuff that I'm kind of picking up as I'm kind of going around the place here. And I was in the car and I was listening to the radio and they interviewed these two guys who kind of won a prize for to get to make a documentary, and it was all paid for by Netflix. I was like, wow, you know, cool. And to do with farming, and I thought, I actually was thinking, oh, like that's really, you know, that's really cool because
Hmm.
farming is a huge story here in Ireland, and
Yes,
the difficulty of farming, and you know, there's massive things, problems with regulations in the EU. Like, it's a really big story and very
and
interesting,
rain.
and and loads of rain. I guess what the you can't really make this up, you know, because I was kind of like, oh yeah, so the Netflix documentary is about farming, yeah, and it's called The Good Farmer and the Failed Son. You know, kind of again very interesting, fully funded by Netflix, as I said,
Oh, it's about Cain.
and
It's sort of a Cain. It's I know. It's what they call the prodigal son. It's like it's
not
from a
really,
biblical
not
reference.
really. No, it's about a drag queen son of an Irish farmer.
Mm.
I've watched a few minutes of it. That was enough. But actually, the father was lovely. The father was really, really nice. But it was like my issue with it is my only issue with it is like it's just, can we just have, why does everything have to be LGBTQ? Apparently, it's a small population, but it feels like it's the dominant. It feels like 90% of people
By
are
the way,
actually LGBTQ. By the way they're going.
dear TV stations, the most popular show on the planet, or almost the most popular show on the planet, is Jeremy Clarkson's Farm. Like it is a massive
Yes,
international hit. There's
yes.
a show about farming
And
with
by the
no
way, what's
wokery.
and there's no wokery in it. In fact, it's actually what's really good about what's really, I mean, awful about the show actually is that, you know, he's obviously very creative. He's got this gorgeous girlfriend, or I think she maybe is the wife now, and they've got all these lovely creative ideas to have a restaurant and get people over and organic wine
Hmm.
and all kinds of nice things. And every nice idea they come up with gets regulated to death. And it's
Yeah.
like it's actually really tragic. Actually, it's really, really sad. But he's obviously very entertaining, and
But also,
as you say, very interesting.
He's done more about farming. I mean, people know more about farming now and how farming works, and I mean that at a very basic
Yes,
level. You know
yes, because of
how
him,
cattle work, how sheep work. You know what?
or don't.
How do you rear sheep? How do you
Anyway,
rear cattle? How do you?
I'm going to put up a photograph up there, Phelim, of the drag queen
Please don't.
you know, everyone will have a look at that. But you know,
Yeah.
and you mentioned earlier, like, so the other thing that obviously, like, totally, you're not in Ireland for 2 minutes until Palestine, Palestine, Palestine. Either the Palestine flag is somewhere, or you turn on the radio and it's the Irish Taoiseach, that means Prime Minister, or the Vice Prime Minister, the Taoiseach, talking about Palestine, or the President of Ireland talking about. So it's Palestine, Palestine, and it's like there are other countries in the world other than other than Israel, other than Gaza. There are other places in the world, but apparently, according to Ireland, like you'd swear it was a province in Ireland. By the way, the amount of talk that they're
Yes.
doing about it. But you had a story, Phelim, about. I mean, this is. Again, another really annoying story. And by the way, as I said, we travel around the local town here that I think featured, and you would have probably seen it last summer, had a huge banner outside the pub basically saying Zionists weren't welcome. Well, they've
Zionist
changed it.
barred. Yes.
The
I
Zionist bar.
assume. I assume the local licensing authority has said you can't bar people from a pub because of their political opinion. So it's now, genocide not welcome here or something like
Yeah,
that. But
yeah.
it's with the Palestine colours. There's Palestine flags all over the place.
But anyway,
Anyway,
but
but
in Dublin, what a really interesting story with these two people working at a primary school in Dublin. What were they wearing,
elementary
Phil? And
school.
these two people working at an elementary school in Dublin. What happened to them?
Oh, you know how it is. You wake up in the morning. You used to be a teacher and say, "What am
I
I
used
going
to
to
be a
wear to
teacher.
school today? What am I
A
going to wear to school
kafaya.
today?" A
A
kafaya,
kafaya.
t-shirts, and a tattoo in support of Palestine. One was
Yeah.
a teacher, a man, a woman, a teacher, and a special needs assistant at a primary school. And when the parents objected, obviously I don't know if they were Jewish parents or just sensible parents.
I think there were some Jewish parents, but I mean, you don't have to be Jewish to
No,
find this really upsetting.
but the people involved said that they were allowed to harass and bully them with impunity. They've now resigned. I assume they're going to sue someone.
Oh, I bet.
And with had tattoos. I mean, and in a complaint seen by the Irish Times, the parents claim that the T-shirt promotes the ethnic cleansing of Jews. Funny, the Irish Times does not name the school, which is kind of weird.
That is
So
weird.
it's obviously a very posh school that a lot of the journalists at the Irish Times go to,
Yeah.
and
One of
they
the
don't want
parents,
to.
one of the parents who complained, by the way, said that the T-shirt worn by the special needs teacher had a watermelon covering the full state of Israel, and that basically people know what that means. But basically,
Yes.
that's interpreted always as wanting the annihilation of the people of the Jewish people, basically.
Yes,
But of course,
she just couldn't.
the two teachers are so stressed, Phil. They're really stressed,
Yes,
they're really
I had to
upset.
resign. Couldn't continue to work there. And she says, yes, I agree. Staff should not be seen to be taking sides in times of war and conflict. But she says this isn't a war or a conflict. It is apartheid. It is genocide, ethnic cleansing. And if you're not taking a side, then you've taken a side. God help. I mean, these are teachers. They need to understand the meaning of the word genocide.
Yeah,
You know?
no, I make that. I mean, it's obviously slightly, but I think Jewish people kind of appreciate, and the Jews are the very first people to make jokes about very serious things, which I appreciate. But I
I'm
think
talking about.
we have a lot
Yeah.
of very dear friends who are Jewish, and we know very, very talented Jewish people. I just think they're just not great at genocide because
Yeah.
if you're taking your genocide seriously. You could
Yes.
have wiped out the population of Gaza in like a couple of days. No
Yeah.
bother at
No
all.
bother.
And when people are quoting numbers, by the way, and this is, I mean, I really feel that we need to always remind people of this because the Irish media certainly don't, the BBC certainly don't, that the numbers that are quoted are coming from the Hamas-run health ministry of Gaza.
Hmm.
Hamas-run, and in fact, they've already had to a number of times readjust the numbers because the numbers made no sense. Because they're just making them up as go along. But if Israel was serious about genocide, if the Jews were serious about genocide, they're just not good at it. Obviously, not great at the old genocide.
Let's just say on this side of the Atlantic a little more. I mean, obviously that Glastonbury was on at the moment. Have we covered that? We haven't covered
Oh, we have not
Glastonbury.
talked about that yet. Unbelievable Glastonbury this last few.
Let's play the tape there. Let's play the tape of our friend Bob
Violin,
whatever.
Violin, yeah.
So this is let's play it.
Death to the IDF. Death to the IDF. Death to the IDF. Death to the IDF. Death to the IDF.
I think the first thing to say, by the way, the very first thing to say is his name is a play on Bob Dylan, Bob Violin rather than Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan, Jewish, by the way, and proud of being Jewish. So that's an epic fail to start out with, you know, and calling for the death of the IDF, unbelievable. And
So
this
this
was
was live stream,
broadcast, live
but
streamed
actually,
by BBC.
the interesting thing is there's a woman, Lucy Connolly, who's in prison, got 30 months. She's a mother of one after a massacre of children who were beheaded by Islamists. She said some pretty bad things in a tweet. Went for a walk. She had lost a child of her own. She went for a walk, came back, said that's a bit much, and deleted the tweet after
4
4 hours.
hours.
She
So
got
4 hours after she wrote it, she deleted it, and she got
she got
31 months in
in
prison.
prison. And this guy, and
And
she didn't get bail. She didn't get bail waiting trial. This guy's walking around the streets now.
yeah,
Now,
yeah,
obviously, from a free speech point of view, he
yes,
should not be in prison. Lucy Connolly should not be in prison.
correct.
But he shouldn't be live streamed by the BBC either. But this was
Yeah.
live streamed by the BBC. They didn't use delaying tactics. They didn't cut the live stream. You can be sure that if he got up and started attacking immigrants, they would have
Mhm.
immediately cut the line. But they
And by the
didn't.
way, he finished I mean, as everyone just heard, he finished the tirade by saying "from the river to the sea," which is exactly saying the
Yeah.
annihilation of the Jewish people, the annihilation of the population of Israel. You know, and as you said, you know, this was live streamed by the
Yeah.
BBC, and they could have cut it. They could have cut it at any stage, and they didn't. They let him go. And I think also, Phelim, it's worth mentioning, and I think it's pretty awful. The audience were chanting with him. They didn't, you know, there was no. I didn't hear boos. I didn't hear any of that. And in
No,
fact,
no,
there were
no.
lots and lots of flags flying. So that's kind of our little tiny rant on Ireland. Hopefully it will.
Yes.
Hopefully lots of things will improve. Who knows? And maybe the rain will stop. But for right now, it's very wet here.
It is. Talking of weather, back on the other side of the Atlantic, so I don't know if you saw the tragic story out in Lake Tahoe
Oh,
about
it's
those
terrible.
people who were killed. 8 people were killed on a boat in Lake Tahoe. It was a DoorDash executive, Joshua
Oh
Pickles, his
gosh.
parents, his uncle. He's left a wife and several children. There was other 4 family friends, but they were on a boat in Lake Tahoe, and there was a sudden storm on Lake Tahoe. Now, Lake Tahoe, for those who don't know, is a massive lake between
Between Nevada and California.
California and uh, you know, storms can come up on it. The bit that caught my attention was in the New York Times. Boaters were caught on where, said the New York Times, the abrupt, unpredictable storm did not meet the National Weather Service's criteria for severe weather on Saturday, said Don Johnson, the warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service in nearby Reno, Nevada. We
Wow.
would issue a severe thunderstorm warning if we were seeing a strong thunderstorm capable of reaching near 60 miles per hour winds. Not when we saw the radar occur to us that an event like that was capable of occurring. These are the same
Unbelievable.
people. These are the same people who are telling you have to stop driving your car, or you have to, stop using your gas cooker because
Yeah.
the weather is going to be terrible in 100 years' time. You know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Horrible.
anyway, enough of that. I could
Yes.
talk about the road past my hometown, which is it's
I
the most
think it's
dangerous
worth.
road.
I do think it's worth mentioning that the road, the A5, you know. So basically, this, you know, I suppose, you know, I was going to say motorway. It's supposed to be a motorway, but it's not. It's the big road between Omagh, where Phelim is
The
from,
broad road.
and the big road up to Belfast, and it's super, super dangerous. It's been a bad design since its inception, basically. Uh, 50 people have died, Phelim, in the last how many years? 50 people are dead, by the way.
10 years.
And
Maybe,
and so they come up with this great idea, brilliant idea, by the way. You know, make a proper road, clear out all the bends in it, make it a proper road, and save lives. And that was all going ahead. And by the way, a ton of money was spent. Loads of land was appropriated. Loads of whatever, all kinds of things were done. And this was all guns blazing until what, Phelim?
there was a High Court challenge, and has been shot down. The virtue signalers in the Northern Ireland government adopted a climate change law, and the judge said, "Well, you have this law that says you want to cut carbon emissions, and you're going to build a road over there, so you can't build that road because you got this law here." So there was a price to pay for climate change virtue signaling, and
Unbelievable.
dozens of people are going to lose their lives as a result.
Yeah,
So
yeah, unbelievable.
all
We
right, let's go to the interview now. So
exactly.
earlier, this is an interview I've wanted to do for a long time. It's Stephen Miller, who's not Stephen Miller from the White House. It's Stephen Miller, the journalist. He's one of the most perceptive journalists really working in America at the moment. He's great on how the media are part of the cover up, not part of uncovering the cover up. He's one of the funniest journalists of the day. He annoys people online, which is invaluable. Let's go over to the interview I did earlier with him. Let's go to that interview now. So, Stephen Miller is a host on the Versus Media podcast and contributing editor at The Spectator. He's one of the most perceptive journalists and commentators working in America today, and one of the funniest and one of the best on the internet. In particular, he's one of the best journalists examining how the media have been really part of the Democrat machine and see their job as covering up the news, not covering the news. So, welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thank you. I know a lot about you with your film projects and stuff like that, so I'm happy to be here. I am going to have to ask you to refrain from using the J slur on me, the journalist slur, because I don't consider myself the kind of that low on the totem pole, but I appreciate it anyway. Whenever somebody says that to me, I just they use the J slur, but that's all right.
Okay. I listen. That's kind of what we want to talk about, actually, in some ways.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason I want really, I've been following you for a long time, and but some recent activity with the journalist caught my eye. But I want to actually talk first before we talk about a particular journalist, the general state of journalism in America. I mean, those great journalists, Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, have recently, in their book Original Sin, have exposed how the dastardly White House misled plucky journalists for years. And, they won't get caught like that again. Isn't that correct? We're in a new era.
Yeah, this excuse that they somehow they missed the biggest scandal that Jake Tapper has said was worse than Watergate, and they're kind of going around wrapping up their media tour saying that they just somehow missed worse than Watergate, and we just missed it. And meanwhile, we can do countless amounts of examples of things that they don't miss. They don't miss Donald Trump walking slowly down a ramp. That was a week and a half long news cycle where CNN's Brian Stelter would have neurologists on to analyze this very slow walk down a ramp. Just this past weekend, Jake Tapper had Mayor Eric Adams on from New York, and Adams said, here you have a New York mayoral candidate who's praised Hamas, and Jake Tapper said, I don't think he's ever done that, and he did do that. He did it in several kind of hip hop songs that he did earlier in his fledgling music career, shall we call it. And so this really does go one way. Nobody buys that they just missed a story. They were very much a part of covering up the story, and at least in the sense of ignoring, we're just not going to cover this. We're not going to be on this. And it was all because in service of, if they did, it would be seen as helping Donald Trump. And they kind of created what I like to call a Chinese finger trap with Biden and Trump, which is you didn't cover him. People still saw that you didn't cover him, and they saw how bad a shape he was in. And then the debate simply confirmed that. And Trump's elected because of the whole haphazard campaign that they then had to run with Kamala Harris. And then the other side of this is that they knew that if we did cover Biden's cognitive struggles, hey, he is wearing giant pontoon boats on his feet. He is taking the little boy stairs. Why is he doing all of this stuff? They knew if they covered that would hurt Biden's electoral chances. And so they really backed themselves into a corner, and they did this simply because they refused to do their jobs.
Yeah, and they kind of punished other journalists for doing the job. They dogpiled on other journalists, and as you say, it actually backfired on them because it left Kamala with 100 days to present herself to the American people. Actually, which the more she presented herself to the American people, the less they liked her, which was very funny. I listened to all the background people on her campaign saying we only had 100 days, but I mean she was at her best in the first few days. But that's almost beside the point. Yeah, you're right that if they'd done their job, they may have had a Democrat in the White House. Actually, if there had been a proper primary.
Yeah, I think that's, you've heard me talk ad nauseum, as have anyone else, the infamous LA Times reporter note card, where it wasn't just Biden calling on people. It was, here's her face, here's her question, here's the order handwritten. Okay, you're going to do this, number one. And then she gets up and asks a pretty mundane question about semiconductors. And then photojournalists zoomed in and saw that her exact question was written out in his hand. And that to me was kind of the moment. That was in April of 2023. And that's the moment where the mask came off and everyone saw that you had a White House press group working with the
Yes.
White House. Maybe not all of them, but certainly some of them. And that should have been a genuine scandal. And that could have led to a whole kind of cascading thing where you start questioning why Biden needs his questions written out for him. And if journalists had kind of followed that path, they probably could have pressured him out of that race. And they could have had, like you said, a healthy primary where you just aren't forced with Kamala Harris, who is the most unpopular vice president in modern history. Her approval ratings were lower than Dick Cheney, and he shot a guy in the face. And so you could have had a primary. You could have had Newsom in there, or Buttigieg in there, or maybe Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And yeah, you're right. I don't know, given the economic circumstances, if a Democrat wins, but certainly someone who is, broken clean from that White House. So somebody like a Newsom who had nothing to do with that White House.
Has there ever been a reckoning or an explanation? And let's just tell people. I mean, to me, you're right, and I've been following you, and that is the big unspoken of scandal of the coverage of Biden's cognitive decline. He had and this is the White House correspondents. These are the toughest people in the room, the hard-bitten, if their mother told them that she loved them, they'd check it out, three sources, these kind of people. And they were colluding with the White House. Giving questions in advance with a photograph and on the order of the question. And when they stood up, they asked the question. I mean, that's pretty unprecedented. And it's never been done for any other president, has it?
It might have been, but certainly we don't have that treatment with Donald Trump, who will talk to the press 50 times a day, on Air Force One and then in the Oval Office. And that's certainly not scripted questions. And it really should have been a scandal. And to this day, I can't get an answer from anybody. I can't get an answer from Alex Thompson. I can't get an answer from Jake Tapper. They're certainly not going to respond to me. Alex Thompson was asked the question about that specific note card very kind of sloppily by Ryan Gudersky, who I like, but when you're trying to press journalists and say, you have to be very specific and say,
That's
look,
right.
on April 23rd, Joe Biden was seen with a note card in his hand with an LA Times reporter's face, name pronunciation, and the question that she then asked. How does that happen? Because there's only kind of one of three ways that can happen. One, she has somebody in the White House, and either the White House says, hey, you're going to ask Joe Biden this question. And a real journalist would then go, that's a story. You're telling me what questions to ask him. I'm going to write that down. And would you like a comment? The other answer is he solicits somebody in the White House, I don't necessarily they solicit the White House for the questions ahead of time. And they say, hey, you 5 people, we want you to ask him a question, but we're going to need to know what it is. And then the journalists then submit their questions and then they choose. Well, that's another scandal where a real journalist would say, why is the White House soliciting my questions?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that happened back in 2021. The Daily Beast did a story about how Jen Psaki, upon arriving in the White House, was asking reporters for their questions ahead of time. And a few of them went to the White House Correspondents Association and said, hey, why are they doing this? And it died because at the time, Kelly O'Donnell of NBC was the head of the White House Correspondents Association. She has said this doesn't happen at all. Like, this is a conspiracy theory. Well, we know it's not a conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm.
We have photographic evidence.
Yes.
Kelly O'Donnell then got the first question at Joe Biden's Afghanistan press conference, where he said, I've been given a list of people to call on. And not even in 4 years did we get any stories about why does Biden need a list of people to call on. The other strange tick that he had that never garnered attention was he said, I can't take too many questions or I'll get in trouble. And if I'm a journalist and I'm in that room, I raise my hand and go, who are you getting in trouble with, sir? You're the president of the United States.
Yes.
What? Who are you getting in trouble with? Your wife? Like, what is going on here? And so this idea we just missed a story. Well, no, he gave us these tells throughout his whole 4 years where he either wouldn't take questions, he said he will get in trouble. Well, who are you getting in trouble with? We obviously have the Easter Bunny incident, which I think is another one. And this goes completely unmentioned in Tapper's book. This is the one where people woke up, to me, where he's off talking to reporters at the Easter egg roll. And the interesting thing is he's talking about Afghanistan because there's an angle where one of the cameras is, on Biden. And that's when the Easter Bunny comes over and, waves, hey, and he kind of, whoa. And the Easter Bunny guides him away. And that was one where people just kind of went, that's the most absurd thing we've ever seen from a United States president. Like, Could you imagine that with Donald Trump or any,
Yeah.
like Easter
Yeah.
Bunny comes over, you're the president, you look at them and you go, can I help you? Like,
Yes.
no, I'm talking to people. I'll be over there in a second. No. And so the other interesting thing is, I forgot her name, but the aide in that costume was not like an intern. It wasn't like the communications intern. She was the director of White House messaging. She was the special envoy to the President of the United States and a White House advisor. That's a pretty high level job to be
Yes.
throwing on a furry costume. So there are all of these indicators that, again, with this story in particular, they didn't miss a story. They just chose to ignore it, and it cost them.
It cost them. Yeah. And they haven't learned. They're still doing it. I mean, they're still covering up, and they're still choosing to focus on Donald Trump stumbling on a stair or
Right.
walking slowly up a step. Uh, uh, they haven't moved on, but I want to move on. I want to talk about Donnie, our friend Donnie, our mutual, my compadre, my fellow Irishman, Donnie. So Donnie O'Sullivan, he's the CNN's extremism correspondent. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was a disinformation / right-wing extremist reporter.
Yes.
I don't know if right-wing is in his bio, but yes.
No, he's not. No. And let's get on to that, actually. He's actually the extremism correspondent, right? And he's
Yeah.
Irish. He's got a huge fan base in Ireland. He's a hero, actually, in Ireland. Sort
For
of a
what?
journalistic... For covering the Capitol insurrection. He got his own documentary. He's a local boy made good.
Wow.
He's on the Late Late Show, which is the oldest talk show on the planet, actually. And it's everyone in Ireland watches it on Saturday night, and a regular guest is Donnie, who comes on and tells people
Good for him.
what America's like. Yes,
Oh,
and
that's who I want telling the world what us Americans are like. Let me tell you.
So you have described him as the worst journalist in America.
I said he was coming for that crown. There's some, since a lot of these guys have migrated to Substack and kind of fallen off the map a bit. There's kind of this there's this dangling crown that they're all working for, and he's making quite an effort for it, or he was, and with that kind of little giddy tit-to-tay sit down with Taylor Lorenz. And the thing with people think like I hate or whatever on Taylor Lorenz. I think she's crazy, but she is one of the smartest people out there as far in media, but as far as knowing what buttons to push, how to get an audience, whether what she says is true or not. But she's not interested in that. She's interested in an audience, and she knows very well how to push buttons and how to get that audience.
She really does. She seems to have no moral compass, actually. It's very interesting.
But no journalist really does, and to be able to have to push the right buttons, you can't have a moral compass, and that's kind of what separates guys like me from people like that. And so he has the sit down with Taylor Lorenz, and this is all in service of trying to, I call it the cool kids table of journalism. It's, you can't sit with us. And you talk about, the people who did report on Joe Biden, you're right, they're dogpiled, they were intimidated. Some lost entire careers. You can ask Olivia Nuzzi how that went. She did herself no favors, but she was one of the first reporters out there with, Joe Biden's condition right after the debate. And so Donnie's sitting down with Taylor Lorenz post everybody knows how nuts she is that's an audition to be kind of in that club. And the easiest way to get into that club is to portray the political right as some violent insurrectionist QAnon cult. And so that's kind of what he's doing with his CNN series and like that. But there's just several flaws with this, as I've noted. In the intro to his series, he cites the Capitol insurrection, he cites Charlottesville, and then he cites the Oklahoma City bombing, and he says there's really no equivalent to that on the left. And I'm sitting here going, we have a Charlottesville happening every week in this country, in cities like New York, with hordes of people marching down the street with Hezbollah flags and Palestinian flags. The Capitol insurrection, which I think I was the first right-wing writer to call for Trump's impeachment on that day when it happened. I said, this is bad. Get him out of there. Just get Pence in there. If he doesn't want to do the job, then fine. This is a very bad day. It also happened 5.5 years ago, and the country decided we're going to put the guy who kind of stoked all of that back into the White House. So the country's spoken on January 6th. Very bad day. Should not have happened. We all moved on with our lives. Charlottesville happened in 2017. That's almost a full 10 years ago. And again, something that was bad, but something they also try to pin on Trump, and that's had to been corrected over and over again about very fine people.
Yes.
And then Oklahoma City bombing was 30 freaking years ago. I don't know if I can swear here, but I want to. And so to sit there and say there's no equivalent to that on the left today in modern day America, when 2 Jewish embassy staffers were just shot dead in the street a month ago, and the very next week, elderly people in Boulder, Colorado were hit with Molotov cocktails, and we just got the news today that one of them died.
Yeah, burned to death.
Which he completely ignores. And
George Floyd, by the way, George Floyd riots, we suffered them in LA, BLM, Trump assassination. Do you remember the 4 police officers shot dead in Dallas by an anti-white extremist?
No, those are all lone wolves. Those don't count. That's what they say is these are not indicative of the political right. But every time a guy tries to drive his car to get out of protesters, this is a right-wing extremist who needs to be hunted down. And so to be able to sit there and say that there's no equivalent to that on the left, you have a guy running for mayor of New York City right now who has sanitized the word intifada, okay? You have college campuses that were stopping Jewish students from even being able to go to class. And so the dishonesty of it, he's either willfully naive or he is extremely dishonest. And I don't think he's naive. You don't get to that kind of job being, an idiot. No. But to be able to sit there, and I just checked his Twitter feed as we were coming on because we were going to talk about this. He has not spoken of anything to do with the Boulder attack. He has not spoken about the Jewish embassy attacks. You had a man beat to death with a bullhorn in Southern California by a Palestinian adjunct professor. Out of the news. The shooting in Minnesota that they tried to put on, Donald Trump because the guy was supposedly an InfoWars guy. Oops, it turns out he was hearing voices and he thought Tim Waltz told him to do it. That story's out of the news. And the last 2 entries on his Twitter feed are basically ringing endorsements of Zohran Mamdani in New York City, who, again, is a guy who has very explicitly called for the mass murder of Jews in the support of Hamas.
Yeah. So this is the CNN extremism correspondent. By the way, the quote is: "There's no leftist equivalent to the Oklahoma bombing, Charlottesville, or January the 6th." As you say, we have it every week. I mean, someone went up to 2 Jewish people in Washington D.C. and he didn't know they were working for the embassy. By the way, because they didn't know it was an embassy event. It was a Jewish event. They shot the guy. He shot the guy. He shot the girl. The girl crawled away. He ran after her, reloaded, and shot her on the ground. There are Jew hunters roaming the streets of Washington D.C. But there's no left-wing
and he can't find them anywhere. They're gone. Something that's, and I've kind of moved on to this idea that with the embassy shootings in particular and the Molotov cocktail attack, both of those came on the heels of erroneous reports, one that CNN did pick up. And the shooter in D.C. actually cited it was the 14,000 dead babies in Gaza that the BBC and Sky News ran with, that they then had to retract and correct because people started asking, what are you basing this on? That guy who shot those 2 young staffers cited that in his text messages. So that's a story that the American media directly, because of their involvement in the story, led to a shooting. And then the guy in Boulder, Colorado, people forget that the day that happened, that was the morning that BBC and also CNN and media outlets ran that Israel IDF had opened fire on an aid post. And they said, this is according to the Gaza Health Ministry, which is Hamas. And so that later that day, after the story was corrected, it was retracted, that is when the guy walked onto the mall in Boulder, Colorado, and threw Molotov cocktails at elderly peaceful marchers. Those are 2 instances that you can link that this guy could have read and it could have enraged him to the fact that Donnie and his network are literally getting people killed. Yeah. And to sit there and blame Charlottesville, something that happened 8 years ago, and you really can't find a modern day equivalent to the violence we're seeing happening on the left, and that's my issue with Donnie O'Sullivan.
To be fair, and I want to say this, I'm not a big fan of you wrote this and someone went and killed someone, because people have responsibility for their actions.
Correct. Neither am I, but that's the ball game that Donnie is playing.
Their rules.
That's right, and that's the only rules I can play at. This is not my monkey. This is not my playground. I play by the rules that they tell us to play by. The other thing that Donnie O'Sullivan completely omitted was the James Hodgkinson softball shooting back in 2020. Rated, I think it was 2019, or no, I'm sorry, that happened in 2017 in the late summer after Charlottesville. Completely ignored it. This is a Bernie Sanders campaign worker who opened fire on 9 members of Congress and almost killed them. And
tried away about 10% or 20% of Republican
yeah,
congressmen.
imagine, put aside, let's say Trump doesn't turn his head 1 inch to the left, where we would be today. Where would we be if 9 Republicans were assassinated in Congress? And this is, again, a situation that he completely ignores. And so, again, to sit there and ignore, I'm fine if you want to report on Charlottesville. I'm fine if you want to report on January 6th. I'm fine if you want to, bring up the Oklahoma City bombing. That's on Netflix. It's fascinating. You could go and you watch it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But then to say in service of there's no equivalent to that, that's a willfully dishonest statement, and that's my problem.
But in fact, he kind of fangirls left-wing violence, and you've made a meme out of it. Tell us about his interview with you talked about it with Taylor Lorenz there, and how you've memed it. Let's put the meme up there. Actually,
this is another example of it. So when he covered Taylor Lorenz, she's talking about how Luigi Maggioni, the alleged, pretty for sure alleged assassin of the healthcare CEO, they're talking about why he has a fan following. And Taylor Lorenz says, they see this guy who stands up for what's right and he's moral. And instead of actually saying to her, what do you mean he stands up for, he shot a guy in broad daylight. He sits there and he laughs about his Tinder profile.
That's right.
And so that's the meme I
just
pull.
play that. Yeah, let's just play that.
Yeah, I just realized women will literally date an assassin before they swipe right on me. That's where we are.
So yeah, every time that, I see an act of left-wing violence, I post the meme of him saying there's no violence happening. And that, of course, led to, and I'm sure you want to talk about it, him.
Yes.
I don't know what he was doing. I don't know if it was.
Okay, I could say it. A lot of Twitter, angry Twitter spats from Irish people happened on Friday and Saturday night.
I didn't want to do the cliche. That you can do it.
I can do it.
I'm fine with you. I'm fine with you going there. I can't, because then I'll get in trouble, for being racist or whatever. But yeah, I don't know what. So I was kind of wrapping down for the night. Usually, I'll check Twitter one last time before I, hit the hay. So I'm looking at my mentions and I see he posted like a thing of my face, and I was like, what? And I looked at the handle, because people do that. They do that all the time, trolls or whatever, which, okay, I don't care. It's my face. But I looked at the handle and I thought it was a parody account. I was like, because before I respond, I try to really double check these things. And I look and I'm like, that's his handle. So then I go to Google and I type in his name, go externally to there. And yeah, so he's changed his default photo to me, and he changed his Twitter header to me. And I'm like, this is what CNN's extremism reporter is doing, as opposed to covering actual extremism. Yes. And then shortly after, when I saw that, he just deleted his account. It was gone, which I'm sure that was somebody from CNN,
yes.
PR telling him, what are you doing right now? First, don't give him attention. Don't give guys like me attention. That's generally the advice that I know for a fact those newsrooms are given. But then I think it was, what are you doing right now? And then he'd also tagged the other reporter who she used to work at Vice Magazine. And she also just interviewed Mandami in New York City.
Mm.
And that's when all of those posts kind of disappeared with his account. And then shortly thereafter, it popped back up. So somebody, I think, got a phone call or a message. And again, I look at this and go, what are you doing? The biggest problem with him not understanding the meme is not him. The meme is whenever there's a terror, an embassy shooting or Jews are beaten up in New York City, he ignores it. And that's my way of saying, you're ignoring this. So when you just post my face from like a year ago on some random podcast, it doesn't work. And that's the thing. Most journalists don't understand the internet. I didn't come from journalism school. I grew up with, internet chat threads. I grew up with Ain't It Cool News. I grew up with Reddit. I grew up with some 4chan. I understand the layers of irony that are in, 4chan.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to kind of try to traffic in the things that I'm good at, you have to be better than me. And just that wasn't good. And so,
well, in my opinion,
so the meme now became his face with your account has been deleted, because that's what he would rather do than cover Jews being shot in the streets.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Actually, do you think it's that you grew up with the internet and not journalism, or is it left wing journalists can't meme?
I think a lot of it is. I think a lot of it is this. I think one something that I've kind of based everything on is you saw a BuzzFeedification of journalists. So journalists always used to be these kind of middle-aged guys. They were overweight. They were alcoholics. They were drinking coffee stains on their tie.
Sounds
Yeah.
yes,
And these are the guys who had the worn soles on their shoes because they were out there talking to people and meeting
correct.
sources or whatever. And then roughly kind of around Obama age, roughly around 2008, 2009, BuzzFeed becomes this huge website. And it's not just BuzzFeed as it used to exist was memes and listicles and, here are the top 25 best moments of Saved by the Bell or something, right? And then Ben Smith comes in, they hire him from Politico, and he kind of it's what I call the BuzzFeedification of the news. So he brings in 20-something Brooklyn journalists because they understand the internet, supposedly. And those are where we need to get eyeballs. And so that's where you got a lot of stories about the 15-year-old girl in Iowa is wearing a kimono for prom, and we can't have that. That's cultural appropriation. BuzzFeed was one of those news outlets that really codified that kind of journalism. We saw it through, hiring Andrew Kaczynski and K-File. It's not that they can't meme. It's that they come from, elite institutions. They come from schools where they get a journalism degree. And then when they get into a journalism, somebody says to them, you're on the 4chan beat. And they go, what's 4chan? And I think that this is what happened with Ben Collins, who was NBC's disinformation reporter. Now he's at The Onion, ironically, is we're going to just put you on the 4chan beat, and you're going to report on disinformation on the internet and right-wing extremism and Reddit. And so they go and then they just start clicking away at 4chan, and they see the most ungodly amount of horrors that they've ever seen in their lives. And then it's, oh, geez, they don't understand the culture of it. And so I do think Taylor Lorenz gets it. I think she's probably the only one who gets it. And that's why you get the other journalists kind of flocking to whatever she says. Taylor Lorenz is the one that got all the journalists to migrate to Mastodon. When Elon Musk bought Twitter,
That's right.
he kicked everybody out. She's the one that's like, hey, everyone, let's go to Mastodon. And then they go over to Mastodon and they find out that there's Nazis and kiddie porn. And all of a sudden, oops, that was a bad idea. And so then after the election, they all self-deported again over to Blue Sky. They said, Twitter's a toxic cesspool. We're going to Blue Sky, where everything we do is posting like assassination porn, whether it's Luigi Mangione or assassinating Donald Trump or whatever. And we've just kind of let them do that. It's like, go do your thing. Go ahead.
Did you go over there much? What's it like over there?
I check in on it. I don't post over there. It's just I only have so much sanity for a day. But I do check in on it. I do kind of see what they're doing over there. And when you say that left can't meme, I think it goes on a better thing of they have self-imposed restrictions on themselves. So you can't say something about African Americans, or you can't say something about trans people, for instance, even if it's a joke, like with the Babylon Bee. And so I don't want to say the political right isn't afraid of that kind of stuff. We just don't have those kinds of self-imposed restrictions on our humor. JD Vance, this is a perfect example, decides I'm going to go over to Blue Sky and create an account. The Vice President of the United States, he knows what he's doing. He knows the reaction he's going to get. He's dropping the grenade into, he's throwing it into the room and walking away. And if you go and you just see the responses from JD Vance, you get why he's doing this. And they're all just telling him to piss off and go hump a couch, and you're evil, you're fascist, and he's doing it purpose just by coming in and sitting down. And the thing with journalists, and they're doing this now with Substack, is they don't want a world, especially online, where they can coexist with people. It's why they limit replies. It's why they block criticisms. It's funny because I think I'm the only guy on the political right who tells people to stop calling Brian Stelter a potato. Okay, I get it. It looks like a potato. I understand this, but I don't think I've ever called him this. And I've said because it demeans your argument. And there's people who are going to do it, whatever. But if you're someone of influence, or if you're a journalist or whatever, and you just go, shut up, Tater, well, you've given him an out. And the funniest thing about that is he's blocked me. I'm the guy telling everyone to stop calling him this, and he's blocked me on Twitter. The interesting thing about how they migrate to social media platforms, this is a political philosophy that is talking about decolonization. And they have this habit of basically jumping from social media platform to social media. They didn't build it. Okay, Blue Sky was not built by them. They just went and colonized Blue Sky. They got in, they pulled up, they landed on it, they kicked all of the natives out and said, this platform is ours now. And then when they start cannibalizing each other, they move on to another one. And then they do this. They tried this with Mastodon, as they said, we're coming over here. And then like Parker Malloy starts rooting out all of the content that they doesn't like. And then they start reporting on everybody and whatever. And then they say, well, this platform is ours now. And that's what concerns me about Substack. Is Substack 5 years ago was a white supremacist platform, according to a lot of the journalists who are there now. And so you have Substack who's now catering to people like Jim Acosta. They're catering to people like Chuck Todd, catering to people like Terry Moran, catering to these journalists who basically were fired from the network. And now they're coming over to Jennifer Rubin's a perfect example. And then they're treating it like it's their platform. It's one of the funniest things in the world, their reaction to, oh, independent media is so great. Look how great this platform is. Look how warm the water is and the sky is blue. And then where this inevitably leads is them trying to get people like me kicked off of Substack because they don't want to share a platform with, shit posting white supremacist, whatever they want to call me. And so that's a concern I've raised with Substack directly. And I've said, you guys killed media. And this is what Twitter did. You killed legacy media as it existed. You leaning into wanting to become that doesn't do you or these guys, any content creators, any favors.
That's a very, very good point, actually. It's a very good point. I mean, who is Substack? I mean, have they got the requisite testicles to stand up to this?
I don't know. I think that they are wanting, because now they do like a Twitter thread service, and I think that they want to go from being a newsletter service to a social media platform that hosts newsletters. That's genuinely what I feel like their behavior is. They just hosted a party in DC the same weekend and against the White House Correspondents Association dinner, which I think is the most grotesque thing. Excuse me. The most grotesque exercise that exists in our media. Trump getting rid of that, or them deciding we don't want Trump and then just stopping that dinner, was one of the best things he did in his entire term, if not the best thing. And so Substack hosted a dinner and they had everyone who was like on Substack. So they had like right-wing personalities, and Amelia Hassan is there and Jim Acosta is there. And these are guys who would block anyone that they are, online with or whatever. So they're trying to merge this idea of, hey, we're going to be a platform for everyone.
Yes.
That sounds great in theory, but you're specifically catering to the people who don't want that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my concern. Do I think Substack's going to like ban me? Not necessarily, but they are going to promote people like, Jennifer Rubin and Jim Acosta over independent content creators, which is what made their platform. They're the ones who made the platform viable for, Jennifer Rubin and Jim Acosta and Terry Moran to just roll up in their boats and then try to kill all the natives.
But I mean, I could talk all day, but no one wants to read these people, do they? I mean, no one wants to read Jim Acosta or Jennifer Rubin, really.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've thought about that. Like, who is booing? Who's kind of holding up their platforms? Because you're right, they do have a certain kind of liberal audience. But Jim Acosta couldn't garner, 50,000 viewers on a Sunday morning. And these are the people who all talk to each other.
Yeah.
So, you have Acosta talking to Jennifer Rubin, talking to Chuck Todd, talking to Terry Moran, talking to the Bulwark, whatever it is. And so that's the other concern is, Substack assisted me getting set up on the platform, but they don't finance me. And so that's kind of my other concern, that Substack is actually paying to boost this content. And if you go to Substack's like homepage, and I've heard other podcast subscribers say this, that you go to their homepage and you're getting kind of like, here's Jim Acosta, here's Jennifer Rubin, here's the Bulwark in your feed that you're not even following. And that, to me, again, is the concern.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Stephen, for coming on. We'll pass on your regards to Donnie.
Yeah. Should I give him a face to post as a meme? Should I just do?
That's right. So I just want to be clear. You said he's not the worst journalist in America.
He's coming for that crown in these exercises, because it was interesting when he did the episode about the ghost gun that Luigi Mangione used. He's like, I could show you how to use this gun, but he doesn't push back on Taylor Lorenz. And then when we had the shootings in the embassy and we had the violent incident with the Islamist in Boulder, his next episode was he went to go see a bunch of older Trump voters who believe in UFOs. and he went and watched. He went to go look for UFOs with these people,
Yeah.
and that's another part of it that leave them alone. Like if you're a journalist and your whole shtick. And it really is. Before he became kind of the guy on CNN, he would go to QAnon rallies with his giant boom mic, and he put a boom mic in like the craziest person
The
he could
crazy
find,
person. Yeah.
And
That's
then
journalism.
he would say, "Look who's kind of attending these things."
Yeah.
I've been to a Trump rally. I had to cover one for Spectator. It very much is like a wrestling. It's WWE. There are the few guys that wear the crazy QAnon garbs and the hats, but mostly they're normal people.
That's
And
right.
that is kind of the instance with the media is you're trying to paint just working class people
Yes.
as
That's
these
crazy.
cultish freaks. And so, yeah, instead of going and covering left-wing violence, he went UFO spotting with a bunch of elderly people. And his whole goal is to then try to embarrass these people. And that's something that I will always push back on with journalists. Like, the normal people aren't your story. You know what I
No,
mean?
it's very weird. I mean, what I went, I'm happy to be called a journalist. I went into journalism. I chose it, but I often look at these people. I go, why did you go into journalism? Like, are
Yeah,
you proud of yourself? Like now, I mean, was this what you went into journalism for? Was to go somewhere and make fun of an old crazy person? And just kind of misquote them out of context. Kind of, anyway, they're a bit crazy anyway. But let's take what they say and garble it, and you got your story. And it's like there's a whole world of stories out there as a journalist.
right.
This how do you not how do you sleep at night, but do you wake up happy? Does it make you happy? Does it make is it I call journalism a disease, a syndrome. It's like an addiction for journalists. They have to do it. They have to get the story. But for
Yeah,
them,
a
go
lot
ahead.
of it's a power. Sorry, a lot of it's a power trip. I can use my influence over you to destroy your life. I can, that's a lot of what Taylor Lorenz does. I can use my audience to, come after you. We saw that with John Fetterman. We saw Kara Swisher
Yeah,
basically lead a lynch mob against Dasha Burns when Dasha Burns was questioning Fetterman's brain damage from a stroke, and that was another instance where we saw that. It is a good question, and that's kind of my thing with Donnie is how do you legitimately look in a camera and lie for a living? How do
yeah,
you genuinely do this? How do you go out and say there's no equivalent to the violence that we're seeing on the right in the year 2025 when you have marches going down New York City, Fifth Avenue, waving Palestinian flags and calling for the mass murder of Jews? And so, if you want to cover violence, that's going to be your beat. I'm going to make sure that all of those instances that he misses, probably on purpose, are going to go, I'm going to remind him of that. And if I have to use his stupid, silly face to do it, then that's how I'm going to do it.
very good. Okay, well, on that point, thank you very much, Stephen, for coming on the show, and
Anytime. Thank you.
we'll keep watching Donnie. We'll call it
Okay.
Donnie Watch.
I will leave you to that. I'll leave that to your beat, not mine.
That
Very
was
good.
great.
Very good.
Yeah, he's really
Yeah,
good. Yeah,
he's
so
right.
glad.
He's right about the media. You can't hit them enough. You can't hit them enough.
Yeah, yeah.
So what else is happening? Oh, I mean, you may have
Well,
seen
a lot
lots of
was going
news.
on. A
Yeah.
lot was going on in the Supreme Court, right, Phelim? I mean, this is kind of
Yes.
and good things.
Yeah, we did a Substack on it, and the headline on the Substack is Planned Parenthood going bankrupt? And I hesitated to put that headline on it because it's a bold headline, but I know because I've spoken a lot to David DeLayden that Planned Parenthood is suffering, right,
Hmm.
financially because they can't sell body parts anymore. Like they were making thousands and thousands of dollars from selling body parts per baby. They can't do that anymore. They've got big expenses.
Hmm.
Now the Supreme Court has said that states can refuse to fund them because they provide abortion. So now they're going to lose all this Medicaid state funding. I think that they are in trouble. I
Hmm.
think they are in trouble. So the Supreme Court has basically said, yes, individual states can say, you can't go to that clinic and reclaim your money, your Medicaid funding through us, through that clinic, because it provides abortion. So people cannot go to Planned Parenthood now for anything. So
This is good. Good
more
news.
revenue falling. Birthright citizenship was decided. Well, it wasn't decided. They took a judgment about birthright citizenship, but it was actually a judgment about the ability of courts to block President Trump's actions, and they said
Yes.
courts can't do this. So great news. I mean, Birthright citizenship is a pretty ludicrous idea. Anyway, Ireland had it until it was being abused, and they had a referendum about 20 years ago to overturn it. I think it was 80% of the vote.
Yes,
All
yes.
the progressives were against it, and the Irish people were going, "No, we're tired of people coming here and abusing this." And it's been abused in America. We've got Chinese birth tourists flying in
Mhm.
every day.
Yeah, totally.
There's a whole industry getting visas, etc. So that's
And in
interesting.
more, and also in more good news as well from the Supreme Court, they've decided that because these parents who would like to not have transgender books in the school library, they brought a case, and basically the Supreme Court has closed the book on the school district groomers in favor of religious freedom and allowing parents to decide, what their children are exposed to. So that's all another very good ruling that's just come down from the Supreme Court. It's really good. And
And
six
they've
six
also
three decision. Yeah.
Yeah, they've also decided that it's okay for Texas to demand age verification of people who want to access pornography sites. What I thought was interesting, it's okay for Texas to say children shouldn't access this and people should have to prove what age they are before they access it. The court split along ideological lines with conservative judges supporting the law and liberal judges attacking it. So
It's
it seems now
unbelievable.
that
Yeah.
it's a liberal principle to allow children access to pornography.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Because
we wonder why the
when you read that, when you hear that, you're thinking, like, who could possibly be in favor of letting people under 18 have access to pornography? You know what I mean? You're like, well, there's no who'd be on that side? And yeah, actually, you find that all the progressives are. So we've had loads of comments, by the way, from people. I'm sorry I wasn't on the podcast I think I wasn't on the podcast the last 2 weeks, Phelim. Is that right?
Where have you been at?
I don't know.
You off working on top secret projects without me?
I could be doing that, You're like, there could be top secret things happening that we're not.
Oh no,
ready.
there are top secret things.
That's right. We're not ready to disclose just yet. But we've had lovely comments, and actually, Phelim, last week the interview with Chloe Cole was played, and actually, I got some. I know we have some list of people have sent comments, but another one of our supporters from out of the country actually wrote a really nice message about that, and really appreciated. I mean, what an amazing person she is. Anyway.
No, Chloe Cole. And we've had news from Shani, who featured in our October 7 play. She's got engaged. So we had Katie Mac 5661 said, "What lovely news from Shani." Claire Cunningham wrote, and she said, "It's only when I became an immigrant I saw how ridiculous my previously held views on immigration were. I would never say I'm from the country I moved to, and I would never suggest the country I came from is better."
Yeah.
And then, as you say, there was great comments about Chloe. There was one doctor who said Chloe was too young to go on puberty blockers, but he, as the commenter said, he was the only doctor who said no. Imagine being the one adult in a room full of professionals who had the guts to speak up. But did it make any difference? It didn't. And then another commenter says Chloe realizing what she'd lost when learning about maternal development after her double mastectomy. It's very distressing to say that. He says, the commenter says, Chloe's realization after learning about maternal development in psych class was heartbreaking. Her teacher gave her more clarity than her doctors did.
That's terrible. Yeah. No. I mean, and this is something that we're very exercised by. I mean, it's as Dr. Miriam Grossman, who's our dear friend, who's a child psychiatrist, said, and she said it in her book Lost in Translation. She said, I don't use the word lightly, but this is evil. And there's Chloe exactly is a very good example of that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say one thing about Shani actually as well. When we think, like when we were listening to that awful guy that was on stage, this Bob Vinyl or whatever his name is, at the weekend in Glastonbury, to think that he was saying death to the IDF, that's Shani. That's our dear Shani. That's our gorgeous Shani that he's talking about. And it gets really, it feels very personal when you think about the people we know. Every young person in Israel has to join the IDF. You're talking about the annihilation of all these gorgeous young people, beautiful people, brave, inspiring people, and our darling, darling Shani, who's engaged, and we're so happy for her. That's enough from us for this week, I think, Phelim. And we will let you know. And we will let you know next week if the rain has stopped, or if we've just basically floated away, Phelim. But until then, take care, and please do leave a comment. We love them, and we read all of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.